Welcome. It's time for another edition of Martial Law with Marshall Chriswell. And this radio program intended for informational purposes only. The information does not constitute legal advice. The law is constantly changing. The information may not be complete or correct depending on the date and your particular legal problem. Each legal problem depends on its individual facts, and different jurisdictions have different laws and regulations. Because of that, you should not act or rely on any information in this segment without seeking the advice of a competent attorney licensed to practice law in your jurisdiction for your particular problem. A guy like Marshall Chriswell, who is on the line with us here this morning, only if I turn on his button there. Marshall, good morning.
There you are. Hi, good morning.
It's good to have you with us this morning as we talk about something we sometimes we do legal problems of the rich and famous, and we've got one today. Jay Leno, very famous comedian, had asked for and last week did receive a conservatorship over his wife, who has a dementia problem as a result of an accident she had a few years ago. So she's suffering from dementia, sometimes doesn't even recognize Jay, and he sought a conservatorship. Let's start there. What is a conservatorship?
So a conservatorship, and in Pennsylvania we call it a guardianship. In other states like the Lenos are, of course, in California, and they have a conservatorship statute. Basically, what it is it's a court order issued as a result of someone filing a petition and saying that their loved one or other person is incapacitated, is unable to make decisions for themselves, and the court will issue an order setting up, in this case, a conservatorship, saying that this person, often it is a spouse or child or other family member, is appointed as conservator to manage the financial affairs of the incapacitated person.
Mm-hmm. The Bruce Willis case is another where a conservatorship has been sought and granted as well. I would assume that there are tons of legal questions involving a conservatorship or a guardianship, as it is in Pennsylvania. And the first question would be, what if that person who is afflicted and over whom this is being sought doesn't want to do it?
Right, and that is the case sometimes, and so and that's why there's court involvement, and there is due process protections put in place for the person against whom the guardianship is sought. So whenever, and I do this on a pretty regular basis, where someone has, family comes in and says, well, mom or dad is sick. They've been diagnosed with dementia, or they've had a stroke, or something else has happened that they're unable to manage their own affairs. And so we file for a guardianship, and so the court will appoint an independent attorney free of charge to serve as counsel for the alleged incapacitated person. So, in my scenario, an attorney that is appointed to represent mom or dad, who will meet with them, can confirm. I mean, sometimes their job is pretty easy, right? They say, okay, well, I can't even maybe this person isn't conscious, or I can't have a conversation with them, and it's clear that they're incapacitated. Sometimes there are questions, and as you pointed out, sometimes the person who is against whom the guardianship petition's been filed has a totally different view on whether they are incapacitated or not. And I've been involved in situations where the alleged incapacitated person actually wins and says, no, I can make my own decisions. Maybe last week I wasn't feeling well, but that was temporary, and that was maybe in that situation it was because of medication, right? I was disoriented because of medication I was on. I didn't know what I was doing, but we've got my meds straightened out, and now I'm able to manage my own affairs.
We probably have all seen it on a TV show which would sensationalize something like this, but somebody having to prove that something that they say or something that they do is not a sign that they are not about themselves or not competent to make decisions about themselves, and being dragged unwillingly into something like that. I know TV would over-dramatize things like that, but does that happen?
Yeah, I mean that's exactly the situation in that case of which I'm speaking, where elderly man who he had been in a nursing facility for a period of time to do some rehabilitation, and he had made he had been unable to remember his family, to communicate properly, and rightfully so. His kids stepped up and said, "Hey, Dad is not right here. He's going to do some things potentially with his finances. Maybe as people decline mentally, they become more susceptible to scams and things like that." So rightfully, the kids stepped in and said, "Dad's decision making is not proper here." But eventually, like I said, it turned out he was able to come and say, "Okay, well, maybe I wasn't feeling well a few weeks ago, but I'm back to normal now."
What about when it's an older person who is seeking the guardianship over somebody who's younger and might outlive them? But as an adult, they need someone to handle their affairs for them. I would assume that in that case, it really bears down upon the responsibilities that somebody who is seeking the guardianship would have, and that's a pretty serious thing.
It is, and so I've handled guardianship cases where, and this is another sort of common scenario where a child who is incapacitated, possibly since birth, so a child maybe that was born with autism, intellectual disabilities, other special needs, and they turn 18. And often parents are not prepared for this because they've been taking care of every aspect of their child's life for so long, and then all of a sudden they hit the magic age of 18, and a child with special needs, those types of disabilities, they still need the care of a child, but a parent quickly realizes when they try to take them to the doctor or make other decisions that, I don't have the legal authority to do this anymore. So we file for a guardianship, a legal guardianship of the child who is now a young adult. And so those are considerations, right? The parents are very probably going to outlive their child. So what sort of safeguards do we need to have in place? And often we'll put a co-guardianship in place between the parents, or if it's a single parent, between the parent and maybe even an older sibling or an aunt or uncle of the child, so that there's continuity in the event that one of the guardians gets sick or passes away. We don't have a lapse in care while we're running back to court to get another appointment.
For somebody who is considering seeking guardianship over somebody, what are some of the considerations that they would go through? I know that there would be obviously some very great financial things that need to be taken into account.
Yeah, well, you need to. I mean, the reasons for filing for a guardianship, and usually people become aware of the need and become acquainted with the guardianship idea when the financial issues arise, right? You maybe don't realize it until it's, now I can't get mom and dad's bills paid. I can't get them applied for medical assistance to cover long-term care. Maybe they're in a care facility and we realize, we need to start preparing, doing some estate planning and transferring assets and doing taking some other planning measures to preserve assets and make sure that mom or dad get the care that they need. So there are all these things, and then once you realize, I don't have, as a child or family member, I don't have the legal capacity to do any of these things. That's when they end up in my office and saying, okay, well, how do we do this? Because mom or dad didn't have a power of attorney for financial or health care purposes, which unfortunately is all too often the case, and now they can't sign one because they're incapacitated. How do we handle this situation? And the answer is usually to file for a guardianship.
In the Leno consideration, that is a husband and a wife relationship there. And in the Bruce Willis case, I'm not sure what the family dynamic is there because he's had several different wives and he's got children who are adults as well. So I don't know how that one goes. But I would assume that when there are multiple children involved, it really requires a great effort on those children's parts to come up with what would be the best suitable solution for a parent in this case. And the attorney would have to be, pretty on top of the ball to give advice in that case to them and to help them steer them through this process.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And of course, when you can get everybody on the same page, it's helpful. But in those situations where maybe there were multiple marriages or children, or even one marriage, but kids that just don't get along or have different ideas about the way that dad should be cared for or what have you, that certainly raises troubling situation where you can have a battle in court over who is going to serve as the guardian, and that of course draws out the process. We talked about this a few weeks ago in the context of medical decision making, and the fact that we had there was a real case where a woman was in a nursing home in a very dire situation, end-of-life situation, and she was kept alive for probably an additional 6 or 8 months because her family couldn't decide who was going to make medical decisions for her. And so, getting the family on the same page and doing it before we have this emergent situation is key.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so if somebody wants to begin this process with you, what should they do?
You can always call the office here at 724-465-5826. Stop and see us. I'm in the old RMP Cole headquarters at 655 Church Street in Indiana, or go online to www.westernpalawyer.com.
Very good. Marshall, thank you.
Hey, thanks, Todd. Take care. Have a good week.
You too.